Hello and welcome to the show, The Debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you once again with more news stories and, of course, different angles on the story and expert opinion on it as well. We have a couple of stories that we will be discussing in today's show, one of which has given us all a good laugh and continues to do so still, which, of course, is the award that has been given to Abhinandan by the Indian president, and we've seen that this is an award for something that he has not done, and it has come after 3 years as an afterthought by the Indian regime, and it has brought in a lot of mockery, not just from people in Pakistan but all over the world, since there were many officials who had registered this fact that nothing like that actually happened in the first place. The only thing that did happen was that Abhinandan was served tea and he enjoyed that cup of tea and went back home as a goodwill gesture by Pakistan. Before we move on to all the different topics that we will be discussing in today's show, let's first start off on what the world has been talking about and how their reaction has been on this particular story. I welcome Farrukh Patafi and Raja Faisal to the show as well. Let's of course first start talking about Twitter, which seems to be really enjoying the responses to Abhinandan's award. Which one do you think, Farrukh or Faisal, what is the best one that you've come across?
That's my favorite.
Which one?
Shaheen Afridi one.
Absolutely. That's quite a competition, but I think Abhinandan wins them all. Farrukh, what about you?
Yeah, I'm still waiting. There was one.
The cartoon one?
Yeah, the cartoon one.
The cartoon
yeah,
one,
no,
yes.
that was
Spot
most
on.
amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But sadly, this actually proves
This
one.
This one.
Yeah.
This one. Brilliant, brilliant.
kind of
But
expression.
Abhinandan does it better, for sure. For sure. Amazing, amazing how this is actually true. This is actually happening.
No, let me tell you one thing. I think very less people know about this fact, that I actually hail from the same area where he was downed.
Okay.
I even know the places like even Pind Aziz, there is Kas Gumma.
Which plane are you talking about?
I'm talking about MiG-21.
Yeah, please,
Right.
There was only
clarify that. It's quite
clarify.
important.
there was only one plane, and he ejected from
So
it.
when you said that I'm going to come clean, I thought that you are going to say that I was the pilot who was flying F-16.
Could be, could be.
And there's another thing I wanted to share. You know, people from my area, of course, I hail from a village. So people from my area, I still remember that I was told that, you know, they were gathering the dhol people and they were beating the dhols, and obviously Bhangra was going on in there. Number two, he was badly beaten, badly bruised, given a bloody nose, and
By
then
the
later
locals.
on,
By the
he should have been
Yeah.
thankful to the Pakistan army that they saved him.
Right.
They saved him.
There
Otherwise
was
he
a
would have-
shot,
Exactly.
but they had to actually fire in the air to save
Exactly.
him,
Yeah.
to disperse the crowd.
Exactly.
But to be honest, they say that when gods want to destroy some nation, they make them crazy. They make them mad. The way India has actually believed in this figment of imagination actually is hair-raising.
It
right?
is, it is.
Honestly, and frankly.
And then to be awarded for an imaginary feat.
Yeah, honestly, because there wasn't any F-16, the entire world has said
Yes.
it. Christine Fair, who has been very critical of Pakistan, she has been very clear. She has actually deconstructed the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is that then this kind of propaganda or make-believe figments of imagination make you actually butt of a million jokes, and that is
That is what has happened. And the worst part is, I feel bad for the guy. I feel really bad for Abhinandan. He's in the worst spot, honestly, above
And
everyone
I
else.
tell you, it always, I think I must thank Abhinandan that it always used to be very difficult for me to make people understand where I hail from.
Okay.
But since he downed his plane there, it's so easy for me.
Yeah.
I only say where Abhinandan crashed, this is where I am.
Right. So you don't need any GPS now, right?
Exactly.
But again, regarding Abhinandan, you know, I was astonished that he was given this Veer Chakra.
Yeah.
A, because if anybody deserved a Veer Chakra, it was state of Pakistan.
Absolutely.
Because we had returned the hero to them.
Right, exactly.
And secondly, when you look at how it went on, the fight, the problem is that any pilot who ended up in Pakistani space and then was downed means that he was trigger happy. He was not a good pilot, right? And then, because Modi Saab is the head of the country and the government, now celebration of mediocrity is going on. And unfortunately, that actually reflects poorly on India, where India has produced these great minds and influencers around the world.
Right.
And yet, they cannot actually stay within the realm of facts. And they have to believe in this magical F-16 Downing story.
Yeah.
Well,
By the way, talking about Abhinandan, there are two things I wanted to share about through my source. In them days, I was told this. He was, number one, he was kept really well wherever he was kept. And I have a source who actually told me, first-hand source, who actually told me that two things he still remembers about Abhinandan. Number one, early in the morning, he asked for his barber because he wanted to fix his mustache. Number two, that officer kept on showing him the videos coming from Indian side, and obviously Indian media was shouting and all, and they wanted a war mongering was going on.
Right.
And Abhinandan said that I think you people want to let me go, but they don't want to accept me.
Wow. And now after 3 years, we see that this is what has happened. And I think the precedent has been set for people in India that if they want to win such an award, they know what to do. And they can always ask for our help, and we'll be gladly giving them that help, and so they can win this award. Let's include our respected guest in the discussion as well. We have Fahad Masood, who's an international security analyst. Thank you very much for joining us in the debate.
Pleasure being here.
Of course, there's much to laugh about regarding what has happened, the award that has been given to Abhinandan, and we've seen that all over social media and on Twitter as well. But the fact that it's true is ridiculous, to the point where it starts becoming not funny anymore.
I would tend to agree with you more than anything else. First and foremost, it is comical. Secondly, it is beyond belief that something like this could materialize in any worlds possible. A MiG-21 coming across, taking off after a blitzkrieg effort by the standoff weapons of the Pakistan Air Force, made with the Mirage or the JF-17, and trying to catch a four-ship JF-17 in the north, and in the process getting shot down by a Wing Commander Noman, who was piloting the F-16 with a BVR shot, was a reality. But the flip side, once they claimed that an F-16 was shot down, hardly a reality there.
Right, Fazab, with your permission.
Absolutely.
Fazab, you were talking about BVR, that is beyond visual range. But I wanted to know, because you must be following the Indian media as well, what do they present as evidence about this whole travesty of truth? Can you just help us understand? Because so far I've heard the international experts who keep on deconstructing what India has been saying.
Yes, the only figment of claim or the thing that they bank on is the shrapnel of that AIM-120C5 AMRAAM beyond visual range missile that was used by Hassan Siddiqui to shoot down the Su-30 is what they have, and the then Chief of the Air Staff was presenting it on national and international television, hailing that we have shot down an F-16 with Wing Commander Shazuddin. That's the name what they created. They showed a few pictures of the person as well, which I know, and I wouldn't like to take names there, but that is the only minor evidence that they carry. But once again, this is more as the serial number on that shrapnel it does not correspond to anything that the Pakistan Air Force F-16s manage. It is a shrapnel of the engaged AIM-120C5, and the serial number relates to, very candidly, Taiwan Air Force. That's the even more interesting component.
Wow.
But is anyone actually even really looking for evidence at this point? Are the people in India really questioning this award?
No, not really. To be very candid, they are living in fool's paradise for now because the Modi media, as we call it, has painted the town red for them. And as we understand, uh, indoctrination done so well, where even the masses, where as well as the learned individuals, intellectuals are on the same frequency where they believe that it is a reality. On the flip side, the people or specialists or who are internationally renowned, like names Christian Amanpour and Christine Fair, also made the same claims which we have done. The Indian claim has been negated over and over again, including what the Balakot strike, if we be specific, Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Laboratory, San Francisco-based Planet Labs, they all said the same thing, that the targets were never engaged over the hilltop which was identified as the target area. So the SPICE 2000 was, because of altimeter variation or altitude variation, lost their targets completely. So a fool's paradise more than anything else.
Right.
Fahad, I had a question for you. You being a fighter pilot, a former fighter pilot, I just wanted to know, what do you know about the history of dogfights of MiG-21? What type of history? We know the history about, its existence, that since 1970, they had, so many accidents. Even I think 170 pilots of India, they died up till now just because of the accidents of MiG-21s.
Yeah.
And then 40 civilians as well, they died. I just wanted to know what kind of history it has in the dogfights. Were there any achievements for MiG-21 as well?
Well, to be very candid, there are achievements, and it was done by our pilots in the Arab-Israel War of 1973, where Sattar Alvi Saab shot down a Mirage 3 CJ, an Israeli Mirage, out of a MiG-21. So this is the plus point for the MiG-21. So I have mentioned this before a few times, and I'll, for the sake of reiteration, say this again. It is not the gun, but the man behind the gun that matters more. So it is not the aircraft, but the person who is piloting that aircraft with all his skill, expertise, and competencies is what is going to determine a win or a loss in a dogfight. So in this case, in the context of the subcontinent, pardon me.
Go ahead, please complete your thought.
So in the context of the subcontinent where we are today, yes, the MiG-21 has been known as the flying coffin, which has been utilized by the Indians since 1965 war. They saw some amount of fight, but not a lot. But in the bargain, it is once again in a dogfight, in an air-to-air combat scenario, things are so dynamic and so fast that it's a matter of a few minutes of a skirmish which determines a win or a loss. And it is also determined by the situational awareness of the pilot himself and the amount of tension that he can sustain, maintain, contain, and convert it into a valuable force. So that is how air combats are won and lost.
Right, Fahad, the kind of things that you're talking about, I'm sure these are things that are common knowledge to the people belonging to almost every air force in the world. These are things that India may not be able to get away in that particular audience. Do you think that the fact that even though the people in India may be indoctrinated to the level where they'll accept anything that's coming from the Modi's regime or Modi media, but the people at large, and especially when this has been verified and refuted by US officials and other prominent people, is India not paying a very, very high cost in terms of making a mockery out of its Air Force by doing such a thing? Is the benefit really worth this cost?
I certainly believe not. If you see Wing Commander Abhinandan, now group captain, since the time of this shoot down that took place on 27th Feb, he has not come on television and not announced whatever the claims that the Indian media or the Indian Air Force is making, or the Indian government for that matter. So there is dichotomy there as well. There will be a day once he will have to accept the inevitable truth. He probably knows it, but the world at large, as a nation state or a country, they are pushing themselves in a quagmire. The reality needs to be looked at and looked at with the most effective truth, because once any nation, country, states, or faces its reality, that is where it tends to learn or improve as a state. And that is what we have learned through international relations, history, through wars. So the method to the methodology to the madness is very loud and clear. One needs to accept its follies. If it does not, it will continue to falter again and again. So let it be a
But
lesson
Bharat,
for
maybe that is too much of an expectation from India.
Well, I certainly think there are sane people that side of the fence as well, but their words are not being listened to. That is where the dichotomy lies within the Modi media, as we call it. There are few and far between sane voices that are coming across. They are always silenced. Not a lot of heed is paid to what the reality lies or where it lies. And this situation is not very comfortable for them. May it be the Chinese Air Force and the Pakistan Air Force. We are, as we've mentioned before, ready, able and willing to retaliate anything that comes across.
And then, of course, we'll see another award coming in from the Indian side. Farokh, considering the fact that earlier we talked about the evidence of this award, or the fact that this particular feat was performed, with regards to what we've been discussing earlier, specifically in terms of what's going on in Kashmir and the human rights violation, we're talking about how the world, there's so many different pictures coming from Kashmir, and the world keeps turning a blind eye towards them. There is so much evidence that's there coming in from Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, what is going on, and that's huge. And even that is not enough for anybody to bat an eye and think that, okay, something's wrong there. But this, they believe.
Right, of course, and there's a reason why. Regarding these MiGs, while you were talking, I was reminded of the fact that there was a time when Indian cinema used to criticize these things. There was, I believe, a movie called Rang De Basanti that was precisely on this matter, these flying coffins. But regardless, today, because Indian government doesn't believe in building the muscle, but actually expanding whatever it has got, you see these flashy, bragging bits about their claims. And that has been happening for quite some time. What happened in the past 20 years, while we were fighting terrorism, India kept on presenting Pakistan as a nut job, and they kept on actually building their own muscle. First nuclear deal, then umpteen other similar kind of, connections. And that's why they got so much influence from international media to software companies and elsewhere, social media companies. Now, this government came, Narendra Modi's, and actually realized that there's a lot of power. So they started using it to blindside the world, and that has been happening. For example, if you go to Google and you go to, you actually search, India, China's certain parts, you will see very harrowing pictures being returned. But when you go and actually import Kashmir into Google, you get all these beautiful pictures of scenic places, nothing else, despite the fact that every single day India generates these visuals because of the violence, where children are blinded because of pellet guns, because India keeps on someday one Major Gogoi decides that he is going to strap a person to the hood of his jeep, and then he's going to drive around like that. And umpteen other pictures. For example, that photograph that broke me, and I literally ended up in tears, was where a child, a toddler, is sitting on the dead body of his grandfather, who was just killed by the authorities. Indian government has decided that it is going to shoot around in Kashmir, and whosoever comes in front of that bullet, if he is a Muslim, he is going to be declared a terrorist, and that has been happening. But coming back to, and this is a very small intervention, Veer Chakra. Veer Chakra is a gallantry award that is given to heroes, and it has a tradition going back to the Indian involvement in 2 world wars. And with due respect, giving it to somebody who doesn't deserve it actually trivializes sacrifices of real heroes of any country. And what India is at this moment doing is burning up everything just to ensure that there is enough light to so that Narendra Modi can bask in that light or glory.
Right, but does India really care about that is what is the real question. Faisal, if you want to quickly also say something about this, because I want to move on to how Khurram Parvez, of course, has been treated in Kashmir, but before that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask another question. I know there were so many questions from Fahad today, but one last question. Fahad, if we, for instance, think about it that as Modi kept on saying that if we had Rafales, the situation would have been different. Looking at the fact that now they have Rafales, would they be thinking about putting someone like Abhinandan into a Rafale and sent towards Pakistan in future?
Well, Rafales are a very different platform. They are competent in their own domain. The aircraft itself is very potent. There is no questions asked. It needs the correct amount of human element in it to ensure that it generates a victory. If we look at the picture 1 versus 1, if we look at the JF-17 Block 3, which is coming up with the Rafale, which is already there, the elements are pretty much there at an equal par if we call air-to-air combat, and that is where all difference lies. We have the ESA radar, which is active electronically scanned array radar, which is the top of the line tech that is available. It has got the capability to carry the JF-17 versus the Rafale with regard to air-to-air beyond visual range missiles, which will be PL-15 to SD-10s, and within visual range with PL-10Es and PL-5s. So it stands at par. What is important is the man, the pilot who is going to come across from that side and engage us, and what kind of quality of pilots do we generate. And we have over time, starting from 65 to 71 to 73 to 2019, proved this over and over again, that within our ranks are file, we are still having middle courts, Yunus, Rafiki, and Cecils in the form of Asifs, Bilals, Nawabs, and the lot of Hassan Siddiqui and Noman Ali Khan. So we are ready, able, willing. Let's get our games on.
Right. Fazab, if I take the liberty of summarizing what you're saying, it is not the question of putting Abhinandans into Rafale, it is the question of putting Rafales into Abhinandans, whether they can actually fly that way or not. And I totally get what you're saying. The concern at this moment is that the Indian government can inhale its own propaganda, and one day it can do something which it is going to regret, and that is a big concern, and it should be for the entire world.
Right. Before we thank you, Fahad, for joining us, something which Faisal asked also made me think about, considering the fact that India has been engaging with different deals with, of course, the US as well, and then with Russia regarding the S-400 defense missile system as well. Considering the fact that how ridiculous this is, is not the responsibility of the Indian military or their state of mind or their credibility put into question? Does it not affect such deals in the future, or are these stunts now taken as something that India does engage in, and it's okay because let India play, or let it do what it wants to do? It's fine. This is what it does, but the rest of it is running in parallel and is separate. Is it like that?
Well, it is more of an international game. If you see that there is a lot of American equipment that has flown into India, and S-400 brings them into the domain of a possible problem with the Americans. So if that thing happens, that is a big question mark for them. For the military, including the Army, Air Force, and Navy, with Bipin in charge, I certainly believe it is a very, very dubious affair, because he is pro-Modi. He wants, or he has disrupted how the Indian Air Force worked. At a time, this is about a month and a half to a couple of months back, he regarded the Indian Air Force as a sub-arm of the military or the army itself, whereas that has been called as a faulty doctrine for a very long time. So it is not the best of times for the Indian military to engage neither us nor China in the north. So morale is low, things are not working in their direction, in the apt direction that they want it to be.
Right. Thank you very much, Fahad Masood, for joining us and taking your time out for today's discussion. We all hope that Abhinandan comes to terms with what just happened today. Yes, Farokh.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one basic thing. Going back to the fact that we were talking about man behind the machine, not the machine itself. I just wanted to remind our Indian friends that regardless of what platforms they have, the fact remains that their army is not battle hardened. We are. We have been, for past 20 years, our Air Force, our army have been fighting terrorism on their own turf, right? When that happens, we know how to fight the enemy as well. And that is the problem with India. There has been Hinduization or Saffronization of the army, Air Force, where they have installed RSS cells within every unit of Air Force, Army, Navy. And secondly, the morale is very low because they haven't battled, and whenever they actually got to borrow a phrase from Faisal yesterday, they got a broken nose. So that continues even today, right?
Right.
So India should not be inhaling this propaganda, and it was bad.
Right. Before we move on to our next topic, I also want to talk about the arrest of Khurram Parvez, who's a prominent human rights activist. And of course, we've seen such arrests happen in the past. We've seen such violations also happening and continue to happen in Indian illegally occupied in Jammu and Kashmir. We've seen that any such prominent personality is put under the label of being a terrorist or being part of some sort of terror funding. And this, of course, is happening under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Before we talk about what happened with Khurram Parvez, Faisal, considering that this act is put in place and it's quite a vague act, it gives a lot of impunity and it also allows people to be arrested and, of course, put in jail for an indefinite period of time. What do you make of this act in the first place? How come this act is there, and what sort of an understanding do the people of Jammu and Kashmir or the people who are enforcing such acts have of what they can do with it?
So now, obviously, they are pressurizing people, and we should not be forgetting the fact that Kashmir is an open jail. And right now, I mean, with the amount of forces, the Indian army in there, of course it can be considered as an open jail. And people like Khurram Parvez is someone who had an excellent following on the social mediums, and he has been highlighting whatever is going on in Kashmir, in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. So I believe doing something of that nature against Khurram Parvez, it is a clear indication that hegemonic India and rogue Indian military can go to any extent in Kashmir, and it is up to the world to listen to the outcries of the Kashmiris. Two more things I wanted to say. Number one, Amnesty International South Asia, I think a little back, they have condemned the capture of Khurram Parvez. Then
Yes.
it is hailable. I mean, we should hail that somehow a world is talking about it. Number two, we shouldn't be forgetting that 3-4 days ago, one of the students who happens to be from Jammu side, he actually came to Pakistan in Islamic University, Islamabad, and he was a student here of BS Mass Communication. He wants to be a journalist, and when he went there, he got captured as well. He got arrested, and they are claiming that we have actually captured an ISI agent. And these sort of precedents India is setting up.
Right.
I mean, these are students, and these are the human rights activists we are talking about,
But
and
we've-
very educated ones.
We've of course seen with what we were discussing earlier is that there is so much that's happening which is beyond comprehension. That's something that's happening on another level. But over here in Kashmir, the people are really suffering, and we've seen that such laws which are also not understandable. They're black laws. They're being implemented in the territory, and we've seen such people like Khurram Parvez being targeted. Farooq, earlier the discussion we were having in another show, we were talking about how it's very easy to put these labels on such people and claim them to be a terrorist and get away with it, and the international definitions don't really matter in effect. So considering the fact that we have people talking about it and speaking about it, the fact is that Abhinandan was awarded that award, and the fact is that these arrests are happening.
Right, absolutely. Regarding his status, whether he is a human rights activist or whether he is a terrorist, when the UN's human rights rapporteur actually says that he is not a terrorist and he is a human rights activist, what other body do you need, right? But regarding what India has been doing, if you just want to look at how they react to social media, just glean through the Facebook papers that have been released or leaked recently. Out of that, you will realize that how much Facebook had to actually accommodate India's government's request of propaganda. And this is what is happening. When you lose all perspective, when you lose all sense of right and wrong, this is exactly what happens. The reality is only which actually can be seen on social media, and that's why they keep on engineering it, right? The concern at this moment is that Kashmir is the original sin that actually undid India's democracy. And I'm not talking about Narendra Modi, I'm not merely talking about Hindutva brigades. When Congress decided not to give Kashmiris their rights, they created a parallel universe or bubble that has been growing, and now it has, in the name of jingoism, taken over entire India. If today India's other parties, which someday are going to come back to power, realize this, they'll have to just do one thing. First of all, they'll have to come to terms with their original sin and try to undo it. Give Kashmiris their right, remove these double standards, and then, of course, India can be a democracy again.
Well, of course, that is the hope, but much of that remains to be seen. We will now be moving on to our second topic, which points towards a far more pressing and urgent challenge, where we've, of course, seen that a challenge, again, that has not been given the kind of attention that it requires. Of course, we've all been experiencing the impact of this issue all over the world. Pakistan in particular has been experiencing the impact of climate change and, of course, global warming. We've seen that air quality index is becoming worse and worse, and Lahore, of course, is on top of the list. It's frequently fluctuating places, with New Delhi as #1 most polluted city in the world. Just today, the air quality index was 181, and of course, this poses a serious problem for the people who are living in the city, or people living in Pakistan and other parts of the world who are experiencing this. The Prime Minister Imran Khan and the PTI government has been working hard towards mitigating these effects of climate change. Of course, the measures include plantation of trees up in forests, hybrid vehicles, reductions in emissions, and putting up with different standards. But of course, at the end of the day, a lot of the responsibility also comes on other countries as well. The developed world also needs to step up. We've seen that in the recent summit, in the COP26, we've seen that some new measures came into light, and there was hope, although it's not binding. But we of course have the hope that perhaps this time around things will change. The Prime Minister today has also chaired a meeting on making efforts towards reducing pollution. He has also talked about how the provincial governments need to be more involved and what measures can be taken in terms of also checking different industries with regards to their emissions. For further discussion on this, we have been joined by Dr. Ajaz Ahmed. He's a Senior Program Fellow at the Institute of Urbanism. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us and taking the time out regarding this issue. Let me first ask you the kind of effort that you've seen from Pakistan since the PTI government came into power with regards to climate change. Do you think that the kind of effort that Pakistan is trying to make is unprecedented? Was this issue never given a priority enough by the government, or do you think that the matter is of the urgency that the entire world is facing? Is this something we can no longer overlook?
Thank you for having me. It is a matter of concern globally as far as the environment and climate change is concerned. And the present government has different initiative. And as you mentioned about the plantation and afforestation is one of the major initiative, which basically is a long-term solution in order to tackle the global warming and climate change. As you mentioned, that Pakistan is not a contributor into the climate change and global warming, but we are suffering from the impacts of climate change. We don't have that high emission record. We are somewhere at the 85th or maybe even more than that number as far as the pollutant is concerned, pollutant countries are concerned. But overall, when you see the impacts, they are very high. Pakistan has been a top 10 countries which are suffering a lot from the issues related to climate change, from the global warming, from various disasters, be it cyclones, be drought or rains, glacial lake outbursts. So just name it. I mean, like we are suffering from that angle. So there are, of course, as you mentioned earlier, there are different solutions. There are different areas in which government of Pakistan is working. Vehicular policy, the policy related to the electronic vehicles, the policy related to having the Euro 5 petrol, it all actually contributes positively into the reduction in the greenhouse gases. So ultimately, and globally, it has been recognized, especially the tsunami, billion tree tsunami plantation is one of the major contributor, positively contributing in order to reduce the carbon emissions.
Of course, these measures have been put in place and they're extremely important and they do their bit. But do you think that these measures are going to be enough, specifically with regards to the pollution that we're seeing in major cities? The Prime Minister has directed to devise a strategy. But what kind of a strategy are you expecting to come out? What measures need to be there with particular reference to minimizing the levels of pollution in cities like Lahore?
Well, I think if we see the root cause, the major contribution in this scenario related to smog is 43% contribution comes from the vehicular emission, and then 22-25% from the industrial pollution, and similarly from agriculture burning and etc. So, and this issue is not only limited to winter, but since in winter the condensation process actually works, and then the smoke settles down, so it is more visible. Whereas in summer, the same amount of vehicles are running, they are exhausting, they are throwing emission into the air, and the city is as polluted as in winter as much as in summer.
Right.
There are different, I think, small initiatives that are very important. Vehicular inspection is very important. If we control only vehicular emission, we are close to 40% reduction into the air pollution. There are various tools which are available. For example, Environmental Protection Act. Are there national environmental quality standards are there, which actually should be monitoring the amount of air pollutants which are being thrown out of industry and the exhaust coming out of different vehicles. We don't have any, like in major cities, we don't have any public transport system, very limited metro buses. You can see in Islamabad or even in Lahore, Orange Train and metro. But the number of vehicles are actually increasing day by day. And then
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ijaz, for that. Of course, these measures are really important, but we've also seen, Faisal, that a lot of the emissions are coming from the developed world, and a lot of the responsibility lies there as well. We, of course, are going to be a part of that side of the world, which is going to face a lot more consequence, and it is, of course, something that's going to impact people in Pakistan, and it's already doing so. Do you think the kind of efforts that we make, and not to minimize their importance, but do you think that the kind of efforts that we're making are just not good enough in terms of the level of challenge or the scale of challenge that we're facing? Is this just a lost battle that we're fighting?
Not really, Sana. I must say, I still remember that Fawad Chaudhry, he is obviously Minister of Information right now, but when he was Minister of Science and Technology, I still remember there was something on the table regarding hybrid motorbikes as well. Look, I want to tell you that we have cars in Pakistan, but number of the motorbikes in Pakistan, they're huge. And if you look at the carbon emissions from motorbikes, I believe they would be more than what we are having from the vehicles. So I believe the steps that were taken at that time, they needed some kind of, there should have been something done, and investment should have been done. And of course, when we talk about the investments, then private sector is the one that we attract to bring it towards that. So we need, first of all, urgently we need, carbon emissions to be reduced, be it through vehicles. I mean, we need to have hybrid vehicles, we need to have hybrid buses, we need to have, everything hybrid, I must say, because otherwise climate change would obviously, hit Pakistan big time. And deforestation, we need to reduce it. Forestation, of course, we need to put in place. And there are so many housing societies in Pakistan. When they make the housing societies, of course, they go through a process of deforestation. We need to make sure that that doesn't take place. And if we talk about the local administrative governments, I think they need to play their role as well, because brick mills and if we talk about the waste management of on the local cities, smaller cities, that is very bad. Why? Because wherever we see, fumes are coming out of the waste,
Right.
which is, of course, it is increasing carbon emissions. And number two, it is actually making everything worse. And we need to control it.
Absolutely. We just have 2 more minutes left before we move on to a commercial. So, Farrukh, my last question would be to you. Considering this, of course, is a major threat that faces people of Pakistan and the world over, just talking about our country, are we engaging perhaps research or students or universities or the academia in general to engage in innovation or to engage in projects or solutions out of the box to solve this problem? For example, the smog crisis in Lahore?
I'm afraid it is not happening. Look,
Can we do it?
Pakistan is a victim of double whammy when it comes to overall situation. As pointed out by Dr. Saab, Pakistan is never nowhere near its limits, carbon emission limits. And even then, on the list of most vulnerable countries, Pakistan is number 8. And if you take a look at other 7 countries that are ahead of us, they are usually very small countries. So it is basically Pakistan becomes the number 1 country, right? At this moment, while you were talking about these issues, there are 2 concerns. For example, do you know that there is an environmental policy or agency in Pakistan? You would know EPA's office, and you would know whether it exists or not, because it doesn't draw any attention towards it. And there's a thicket of concerns here. In 2005, Pakistan had a policy. In 1997, Pakistan had a policy. But what happened then? 18th Amendment. When it happens, it devolves a lot of subjects to the provinces and downwards. And since then, provinces don't have the capacity to handle these issues, right? In all this thicket, the biggest concern at this moment, and given that today's trigger is especially the one you just pointed out, the smog in Punjab, particularly Lahore, and it has been happening every year, right? And why does it happen? Because our eastern neighbors actually burn a lot of stubble. That Delhi becomes most polluted, and then our culture is also such that we also burn stubble. So there are concerns that will have to be taken care of. You were talking about billion
We're
tree
almost
tsunami.
out of time, Farokh.
Okay, sure.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Dr. Ijaz, Mr. Farokh, and of course, Raja Faisal for being with us. You had the discussion. Of course, there is much that needs to be done, and we only hope that we are moving in the right direction. Thank you.